King's Landing stood quiet in the distance. The wind carried smoke and dust through the camp, where the Unsullied sharpened their spears and the Dothraki prepared their blades. The city was asleep, but tense, like it knew something terrible was coming. Tyrion Lannister sat alone in his tent, staring into a cup of wine that had long gone warm. His face was pale, his eyes dull. He hadn't slept properly in days. His mind was at war, not with swords or dragons, but with himself. Daenerys had changed. She was no longer the woman who spoke of breaking chains and freeing slaves. Her eyes had become colder, her voice sharper, and her justice more violent. After the death of Missandei, something inside her had died too. Tyrion had watched it happen, helpless. First, Varys tried to reason with her, then he betrayed her. Now his ashes were scattered to the wind. Tyrion still remembered the smell of burnt flesh, and now Daenerys planned to burn King's Landing. She says it's mercy. Tyrion whispered to himself, but fire is not mercy. He thought of the people inside the city walls, the children, the mothers, the old and weak. If Daenerys unleashed Drogon on them, it wouldn't be war. It would be slaughter, and Tyrion would be part of it. Again, just like when he once served. Cersei, just like when he watched the wildfire burn the Blackwater Bay. He stood up slowly, walked over to a small wooden box under his cot, and pulled it out. Inside were a few sealed bottles and powders, things he had collected during his time. As the hand. Some were harmless, one was not. He held up the small black vial no larger than his thumb. Essence of nightshade, he murmured. A single drop could stop the heart in moments, tasteless, odorless, perfect. His hands trembled. He didn't want to kill her. He respected her once, maybe even loved her in his own way. But she was gone now. The Dragon Queen was not the same person who had once walked through fire to bring justice. She was something else now, something dangerous. He remembered the way she looked at him when he begged her not to attack. "They are not your people," she had snapped. "They chose Cersei. They will burn with her." He didn't argue after that. He just left. Later that night, Tyrion was called to bring wine to her chamber, as he often did. She trusted him. That made it worse. That made it possible. As he walked through the torch-lit corridor toward her tent, he could feel his heartbeat. In his throat, he stopped behind a pillar, opened the flask of Dornish red, and poured the vial's contents into it. He shook it gently. No bubbles, no color change, nothing. Perfect poison. He stared at the flask for a long time. His whole body ached with fear and guilt. "This is murder," he whispered. Then he remembered the screams of burning children in Astapor, the slaves crucified in Meereen, the men she burned alive for not bending the knee. And now, the innocent. People of King's Landing. "No," he corrected himself. "This is mercy." He knocked softly at the door. "Enter," came Daenerys' voice, soft but tired. She sat by a table, looking out of the tent's flap toward the stars. Her silver hair was messy. She looked like someone who hadn't rested in years. "I brought wine," Tyrion said, keeping his voice even. She looked at him and smiled faintly. "Thank you, my friend. Sit." He did. She poured the wine herself, handing him one cup and taking the other. She raised it. "To victory." Tyrion hesitated, then raised his cup. "To peace," he said softly. She drank deeply. He only took a sip. They talked for a while. She spoke of dreams, of how she imagined the Iron Throne would feel under her hands. "I will rebuild the world," she said. "No more tyrants, no more wheel." Tyrion didn't speak much, just listened. Every word made the knot in his stomach. And tighter, and then, slowly, she began to sway. Her speech slurred. Tyrion's face turned white. Daenerys blinked, confused. "What? What did you—" She fell forward, knocking over her cup. Her eyes widened in shock, then pain, then sadness. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Tyrion caught her gently, lowering her to the ground. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I had no choice. You would have burned them all." She stared at him as her heartbeat slowed. For a second, it looked like she was going to cry. Then her body went still. Tyrion knelt beside her, his hand shaking as he closed her eyes. Outside, the campfire crackled. The soldiers laughed and shouted, unaware that their queen had just taken her last breath. He didn't cry, he didn't move. He sat beside her for hours. The dragon was still out hunting. The army was still asleep. And in the silence of the night, Tyrion Lannister realized he had changed the future of Westeros forever. But at what cost? The sky had just started turning grey when Tyrion stepped out of Daenerys' tent. His face was pale, the lines under his eyes deeper than ever before. He walked slowly, with the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing down on his shoulders. His hands were stained with guilt, his thoughts hollow. The camp was still mostly quiet. A few unsullied soldiers marched past him, nodding out of habit, unaware of the queen's lifeless body inside. Tyrion kept walking. He had to find Jon Snow. There was no time. He found him near the edge of the camp, sharpening his sword silently. Jon looked up, surprised. "Tyrion, you're up early." "She's dead," Tyrion said plainly, like the words had no emotion left in them. Jon frowned. "Who?" "Daenerys." Jon froze. What? What are you saying?" "I poisoned her," Tyrion said softly. "Last night. She drank the wine. She's gone." The sword slipped from Jon's hand and hit the ground with a dull thud. "No," Jon said, taking a step back. "You didn't." "I did." "Why?" Jon's voice cracked. With disbelief, his face a mix of confusion and pain. "You served her." "I did," Tyrion whispered, "and then I watched her plan to burn a city full of innocent people. I listened to her call it justice. I tried to stop her, Jon. She wouldn't listen. I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't going to stop." Jon turned his face away, as if Tyrion's words stung more than dragonfire. "You killed the queen." "I saved the realm." Jon stared at him in silence. The wind picked up, brushing dust across their boots. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called. "She trusted you," Jon said at last, his voice hardening. "She who thought of you as a friend." "I know," Tyrion whispered. "That's why she drank." Jon looked like he wanted to strike him, but he didn't. He simply walked past Tyrion and toward her tent. Tyrion didn't follow. Within the hour, the entire camp had changed. Grey Worm stood frozen outside Daenerys' tent. His face, usually unreadable, was twisted in pure rage. When he entered and saw her body, he didn't speak. He didn't scream. He simply knelt beside her and held her cold hand in silence. For the first time, he looked lost. Then, like a storm, he stood up. "Bring me the dwarf," he shouted. Tyrion didn't resist. He was already standing nearby, surrounded by unsullied soldiers. His hands were bound, and he was dragged through the mud as Grey Worm's eyes burned with fury. "You killed her," Grey Worm said, standing inches from his face. "You murdered our queen." "I did," Tyrion replied, not begging, not apologizing. "And I'll face whatever punishment you see fit." Grey Worm pulled out his dagger, eyes wild, but Jon stepped between them. "No," Jon said. "We need to think this through." "Think?" Grey Worm barked. "She was our queen. She wanted to burn the city, Grey Worm," Tyrion said. "You would have helped her, and thousands would have died. She would have won by turning into what she hated." Grey Worm shoved Tyrion backward and paced in a circle like a caged animal. His grief had no direction. "We should march now," he snapped. "Take King's Landing while the Lannister witch still breathes." Jon shook his head. "We can't just go to war without a leader." "She was the leader," Grey Worm shouted. Tyrion looked up. "Then let someone else rise, someone who doesn't need fire to rule." That was the moment it all broke. The Unsullied no longer had orders. The Dothraki wanted blood. And now, with the queen gone, her army fractured like a sword. struck in half. That same evening, a raven flew from the camp to Winterfell, another to Storm's End, another to the Vale. Tyrion sat in a cage made of wood and steel, locked up like a traitor, but he didn't regret it. Not yet. Later, Jon came to see him again. "You've set fire to everything," Jon said. "They'll kill you." "I know. There's going to be chaos." "There already is," Tyrion answered. "Better to face it now than under dragon fire." Jon looked tired, more than usual. His hair was messy, his eyes red. "Did she suffer?" Tyrion shook his head. "No, she just looked surprised." Jon sat down on the wooden bench outside the cage. Neither of them spoke for a long time. "She believed in a better world," Jon said finally. "She believed in her version of it," Tyrion corrected. "And that version didn't have room for mercy." Jon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what now?" "Now you choose," Tyrion said, staring through the bars. "You can fight for her memory, or fight for what's left of Westeros." Jon didn't answer, but in his silence, something shifted. That night, fires were lit all across the camp. The Dothraki rode wild, angry and restless. The Unsullied stood in formation, awaiting a command that would never come. The Iron Throne sat untouched in the Red Keep. Daenerys Stormborn had died before ever seeing it, and the war for her legacy was only just beginning. By the time dawn fully broke over the camp outside King's Landing, the storm had already begun to take shape, not one of thunder and rain, but of broken oaths and uneasy silence. Jon Snow stood at the edge of the hill, looking over the city he had once tried to save. The walls of King's Landing were still, strong, the golden lion of House Lannister still fluttering above the Red Keep. Cersei had not surrendered. Not yet. She probably never would. But now, the one who could have destroyed her, Daenerys Targaryen, lay wrapped in a black sheet beneath the scorched banner of her house. No funeral pyre, no final words, just the heavy presence of betrayal. And an army with no orders. Jon turned around and saw the Unsullied lined up, waiting. Their queen was gone, but their discipline remained. They followed no lords, no gods, just purpose. And now, without Daenerys, that purpose was cracking. Grey Worm had taken command, but his grief made him dangerous. He refused to eat, refused to rest. He barked orders with no end goal. Every suggestion of retreat or negotiation was met with silence or rage. And then came the real problem. A raven arrived from the Red Keep. The message was short. Cersei Lannister invites Jon Snow to parley. Under a flag of truce, it was a trap. Everyone knew it. And yet, Jon agreed. Tyrion, still imprisoned and bound, smirked when Jon told him. "You always were too honorable," he said, coughing in the cold shadows of the prison wagon. "Ned Stark's son to the end." Jon didn't smile. "What would you have me do?" Tyrion leaned forward, his wrists chafed and bleeding. "Cersei thrives on delay. She doesn't want peace. She wants time. Time to gather her forces. Time to make you hesitate. Time to twist the chaos in her favor." "She knows Daenerys is dead," Jon said. "It changes everything." "Not enough," Tyrion replied. "You think Cersei cares about truth? No. She'll use Daenerys' death to brand you a traitor, or worse, a murderer. She'll claim you killed her to take the crown." "I didn't." "She doesn't need you to have done it," Tyrion said, his voice bitter. "She just needs people to believe it." Jon looked away. Deep down, he already knew it was true. When he arrived at the gates of the Red Keep later that afternoon, Sir Qyburn met him with the sickly smile of a man who always saw death as a puzzle. "Her Grace awaits," he said. Jon walked through the halls of the castle slowly, his eyes scanning the marble columns, the burned tapestries, the remnants of past kings. It felt colder now, emptier. He wondered how many of these halls would have been scorched if Daenerys had lived. In the throne room, Cersei stood alone beneath the Iron Throne. She didn't sit. Not yet. She wore black, not out of mourning, but power. Her hands rested calmly before her, fingers clasped. Her expression unreadable. "You've lost your queen," she said, as if stating the weather. Jon didn't respond. "Some say you killed her," she added, watching his face. "I didn't," he said flatly, "and I didn't come here to argue about it." "No?" She raised an eyebrow. "Then why come at all, bastard?" "To stop more death." Cersei smiled. Faintly, "That's sweet but naive. War doesn't stop because one dragon dies. If anything, it just gets more equal." Jon stepped forward. "You have no dragons, no allies, no food in your stores. If you don't surrender, your people will starve before winter is over." Her smile didn't fade. "And yet, I still stand. Isn't that something?" "You won't for long." "Then come take it," she said, her voice like a knife. "Bring your wolves and broken soldiers. March them through the gates. Let's see how many survive." Jon stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do you really want to rule ashes?" "I'd rather rule ashes than bow to traitors." He stared at her. There was no breaking her, no reasoning. Daenerys had been ready to burn the city to end her. Now Jon saw why. "Then you'll get your war," he said, turning away. As he left the Red Keep, Qyburn followed him for a few steps and whispered, "Careful, Your Grace. The throne is heavier than it looks." Jon didn't answer. He didn't look back. Back at camp, chaos had taken a firmer hold. The Dothraki, hearing rumors of Daenerys' death, began breaking into smaller clans. Some spoke of returning to the Great Grass Sea. Others spoke of revenge, burning the red. Keep to honor their Khaleesi. Grey Worm stood in front of Daenerys' body with a dagger in his hand and war in his eyes. "We ride at dawn," he told his commanders. "Against the city?" one asked. "Against all of them," Grey Worm answered. Jon returned just in time to stop it. "We wait," Jon said, stepping between Grey Worm and the men. "We hold our ground." "She was your queen," Grey Worm spat. "You loved her." "I did," Jon said quietly, "but I won't let her legacy become fire and blood. Not anymore." Grey Worm stared at him like he didn't recognize the man. "Then you're just like the dwarf, a traitor." Jon didn't flinch. "I'm trying to end this before more people die." But no one was listening, and in the shadows of the camp, another raven took flight. This one from Sansa Stark. She had received news of Daenerys' death, and she had ideas of her own. In the halls of Winterfell, the raven arrived at dawn. Sansa Stark stood by the long window of the great hall, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as the cold wind blew through. The open stonework, the scroll in her hand trembled slightly, not from the chill, but from the weight of the words she had just read. Daenerys Targaryen was dead, poisoned, and Tyrion Lannister had confessed, but the note said more. It said, Jon Snow was alive. That he'd taken leadership over the Queen's army, that he was trying to stop another war. She didn't believe the second half. "Summon the bannermen," Sansa said, her voice sharp as a blade. Maester Vulcan raised his head, confused. "My lady, there's no invasion." "There will be," she cut in. "It always comes south to north. This time we go first. I'll not wait for fire to swallow us again." Arya stepped into the room from the shadows. "So it's true. Then she's dead?" Sansa nodded. "Tyrion did it." Arya's face was unreadable. "And what of Jon?" "They say he's trying to hold the armies back, but that's not the part that matters." Arya arched an eyebrow. "Then what is?" Sansa turned, her voice low and firm. "The throne is empty." Arya stepped closer. "You think Jon wants it?" "No," Sansa said plainly. "That's the problem. He won't take it. And if he doesn't, someone else will." Grey Worm? Or someone worse? Arya tilted her head slightly. "And what do you want?" Sansa looked her in the eye. To make sure the North doesn't get dragged into another war we didn't start, and to make sure Jon doesn't get killed in the name of peace. Within the hour, ravens were sent to the Vale, to the Riverlands and to the Stormlands. Letters written in Sansa's hand warned of instability, of leadership falling apart, of a kingdom adrift. She didn't beg for help. She offered opportunity. Meanwhile, Jon stood in front of the war map Daenerys had once used, his hand dragging across the pins, still lodged in place. King's Landing was circled in black stone. Winterfell sat untouched in the north. Dragonstone was abandoned, and the Westerlands were silent. Tyrion, still shackled in the corner of the war tent, spoke without being asked. She would have done it already, burned the city, taken the throne. "I'm not her," Jon said. "No," Tyrion replied. "You're more dangerous. You give people hope." Jon didn't respond. Outside, the soldiers were beginning to fracture. The Unsullied followed Grey Worm, but only barely. The Dothraki had begun raiding nearby villages for supplies, ignoring any chain of command. The Westerosi soldiers Jon had gathered over the years were quietly asking themselves a question no one dared speak aloud. Who rules now? That same night, Ser Davos arrived with news from the south. "Storm's End has raised its banners," he told Jon. "They say they're gathering men. They won't say for who." "Baratheon loyalists?" Jon asked. "Could be, or they just smell the blood in the water." Jon sat back, his jaw clenched. "How long until we fall into another war?" "We're already in it," Davos said. "Only question is whether we fight it standing or kneeling." Jon walked outside the tent to clear his thoughts and saw Grey Worm training alone with two blades. Each swing was vicious, wild, nothing like the perfect, silent soldier he once was. "She trusted you," Grey Worm said without looking up. "I trusted her too," Jon replied. Grey Worm turned, his eyes hollow. "You didn't love her like I did. I would have followed her into the fire." "She was the fire," Jon said, quieter. Grey Worm stepped forward, blade still in hand. "You let the dwarf live. Why?" "Because he speaks the truth, whether we'd like it or not. You think you're the king now?" "No," Jon said. "I think we're out of time." Grey Worm lowered his blade just an inch. "Then make your choice. Lead or get out of my way." But Jon didn't answer. He couldn't, because deep down he didn't want any of this. He didn't want the throne, didn't want the crown, didn't want to choose who lived and who burned. He wanted peace. And Westeros was not a place that allowed peace for long. Later that night, Tyrion was visited again, but this time by Arya. She moved like a ghost through the tent, and the guards barely noticed she was there. Tyrion looked up, surprised. "Arya Stark," he said with a dry laugh. "Of all the assassins I expected, I'm not here to kill you," she said. "Yet." She stepped closer. "Tell me the truth. Why you, Tyrion? Why did you do it? Not Jon, not Grey Worm. You." Tyrion's face darkened. "Because I've watched too many tyrants rise. My sister, my father, Joffrey, Daenerys. Each of them convinced they were doing the right thing. Each of them left a trail of bones behind them. I couldn't let it happen again." "You poisoned her," Arya said. "Some would call that cowardly." "Maybe," he said. "But cowardice saved a city this time." Arya stared at him for a moment longer, then turned to leave. "You might live long enough to regret it." Tyrion laughed softly behind her. "I already do." As she vanished into the shadows again, a cold wind swept through the camp, and across the narrow sea, word of Daenerys' death began to reach Essos. The Dragon Queen was gone. But dragons leave scars that take generations to fade. The council chamber was filled with whispers before a word was officially spoken. It wasn't King's Landing, nor Dragonstone, nor any seat of power that hosted this gathering. The meeting took place in a ruined holdfast a day's ride north of the city, chosen for neutrality, hidden under cracked walls and watchful eyes. No throne, no banners, just stone, wind, and suspicion. They came because they had to, not because they trusted each other. Sansa Stark arrived with soldiers from the north and the Vale, her red hair braided with silver rings, her cloak lined with fur, her gaze cold and steady. Beside her stood Jon Royce, grim-faced as always, and a dozen knights in steel and blue. From the Stormlands came Lord Gendry Baratheon, young, uncertain, still not used to the weight of his name. He rode hard and spoke little. From Riverrun, Edmure Tully, awkward but eager, hopeful that his house might matter again in a broken realm. And from the Reach, a delegation of Tyrell loyalists who had survived the wildfire and the war. Now desperate for a seat at any table, it was Sansa who spoke first. "The realm is leaderless," she said calmly, "and every day we wait, another army sharpens its sword." Gendry stepped forward. What of Jon Snow? He was her hand. He led her forces. He's Targaryen by blood. "Jon doesn't want the throne," Sansa replied, "and even if he did, the South would never accept him. They'll say he killed Daenerys." "Did he?" asked Edmure, voice cracking. "No," said Sansa without blinking, "but it doesn't matter." Lord Royce leaned in. "If we don't decide who rules now, someone else will, and they won't ask." Gendry folded his arms. "Then let's, as Jon, bring him here, let him say no himself." Sansa's jaw tightened, her voice like ice. "And what if he changes his mind?" The question hung heavy in the air. Back in the camp, Jon Snow stood at the edge of a growing storm. Grey Worm had begun executing captured Lannister soldiers without trial. Small folk fleeing from the city were being turned away or worse. The Dothraki roamed unchecked, some even attacking allies. The Queen's army was rotting from the inside. Tyrion watched it all from behind bars. "You see it, don't you?" He said one morning when Jon came to visit. "You kill one tyrant and another rises to fill the space. I'm trying to hold it together. You're not holding it, Jon. You're delaying the collapse." Jon sat on the ground outside, the cage head in his hands. "I didn't ask for this. Neither did Daenerys, or Cersei, or Robert, but they took it when it came. I'm not them." "Then prove it," Tyrion said. "Take the throne, not for yourself, but to stop others from claiming it." "In blood," Jon looked at him. "If I take it, I'll have to kill Grey Worm. I'll have to destroy everything she built." Tyrion nodded slowly. "And if you don't, he'll destroy everything you still care about." Elsewhere, Sansa sent a raven directly to Grey Worm. Its message was simple. "If Jon Snow is not released and returned to the north within 3 days, we will march." The unsullied commander burned the note without reading it aloud. His jaw clenched. His grief had twisted into something darker. Not loyalty, but vengeance. He ordered new defensive lines around the camp, reinforced watchtowers, traps laid across the road north. "We are not prisoners," he said to his captains. "This land belongs to our queen. No one leaves, no one challenges." But in the shadows of the camp not everyone agreed. Some unsullied began whispering about returning home across the sea. Some Dothraki, leaderless and bored, spoke of selling their services to the highest bidder. Jon's bannermen grew restless. The northern soldiers wanted to go home. The Vale's knights wanted to fight. The longer Jon hesitated, the more loyalty slipped through his fingers. That night, Arya appeared again beside Tyrion's cage. "You were right," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "I often am. About which thing in particular?" Jon's in over his head. He's trying to hold something that can't be held. Tyrion sighed. "He's too much like Ned, honor before strategy." Arya leaned against the stone wall, her eyes distant. "Do you think he'd survive it? If he took the throne?" "No," Tyrion said, "but he might save others in the process." Arya nodded. "Then maybe it's worth it." The next morning, Jon was summoned by Grey Worm to the central yard. The execution block had been dragged out. 3 Lannister officers knelt beside it, beaten and bruised. "You told me no more executions," Jon said, walking into the circle. "They killed our queen," Grey Worm growled. "They defended Cersei. They surrendered." Grey Worm turned. "You speak as if their lives matter more than hers. They matter because they're alive. That's enough." Jon reached for his sword. The moment he did, 50 unsullied. Soldiers raised their spears. Tension hung like smoke in the air. One wrong word, and war would begin not with horns, but with blood in the mud. But then, from the outer ridge of the camp, came a horn blast. Not one of war, one of arrival. A northern banner appeared on the horizon, then a second, then a third. Thousands of soldiers. Sansa had arrived. Grey Worm turned to Jon, his voice like stone. "So this is your choice." Jon looked toward the growing army behind Sansa, then to the soldiers at his side, and finally to Grey Worm. "No," Jon said softly. "This is yours." Grey Worm stood in silence, his jaw locked, fists clenched. The wind carried the sound of boots marching, thousands of them, as the northern banners unfurled on the hills beyond the camp. Stark wolves, Vale eagles, river trout. The armies were not just arriving. They were encircling. The ghost of Daenerys still haunted the battlefield, though her body was gone, burned quietly in the night by Grey Worm himself. No songs, no mourning, just ash and silence. But now, the world that rose from her death had sharpened its edges. "You brought them here," Grey Worm said, accusing Jon with a low growl. "I didn't summon anyone," Jon replied. "But they came anyway." Sansa rode at the head of the northern line, her cloak whipping behind her. Beside her, Arya wore no sigil. She didn't need one. The whisper of her name carried weight heavier than any banner. Jon stepped out to meet them, and for a moment he looked like a man caught between 2 flames, one that had already burned him and one threatening to start. Sansa dismounted, her eyes immediately finding his. "You've waited long enough," she said quietly. "Now we end it." Jon looked past her. "You came armed. There's no other way to come anymore." He sighed. "You came for war." "No," she said. "I came for peace. But I'm ready for war if peace is refused." Behind them, the Unsullied formed tight phalanxes, spears out, shields ready. Grey Worm didn't speak, he simply watched. Sansa stepped closer. "He won't listen to reason." Jon shook his head. "He doesn't see reason, only orders. And the only voice he followed is dead." Sansa turned her gaze toward the camp. "Then we cut the tongue." Later that day, a final council was called. A last attempt to resolve the matter before swords were drawn. They gathered in the middle of the field, a stone circle once used by farmers, now repurposed for kings and queens. Jon stood beside Sansa. Tyrion had been freed from his cage, though his wrists were still wrapped in cloth from the damage the shackles had done. Arya stood to Jon's left, hand resting on her dagger, but not yet drawing it. Gendry, Davos, and even Edmure Tully watched from behind. Grey Worm came alone. He walked like a ghost of war, skin sun-darkened, eyes sunken, the sword strapped. To his back still stained with old blood. "I will not kneel," he said before anyone could speak. "We're not asking you to," Sansa replied coolly. "You want me to surrender. I want you to stop pretending this is still her war." Grey Worm's hand twitched. "She named no heir," he said, "but I am her justice. You killed her. You all murdered her legacy." "No," Jon said, stepping forward. "You're using her name to justify your vengeance. You stopped fighting for her the day you burned prisoners without orders." Grey Worm's voice rose. "You think I'm afraid to fight you?" "No," Jon said. "I think you want to fight, because if you're fighting, you don't have to grieve." That struck somewhere deeper than steel could reach. But Grey Worm said nothing. Sansa took the opening. "There will be no queen, no king, not until the realm decides, but if you draw blood again, you will not leave Westeros alive. I promise you that." Grey Worm stared at her, then at Jon, then at Arya, whose hand had now fully gripped the blade. He turned his eyes to Tyrion last. "She would have burned the world for you," Grey Worm said. "And you poisoned her in the night." Tyrion didn't flinch. "Yes, and I'll live with that for the rest of my days." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Grey Worm dropped his sword to the grass, not in surrender, in disgust. "I leave," he said. "Me, my men, the ones who remain loyal. We will sail east. There is no queen here, no cause left." Jon stepped forward. "You'll be watched." "I welcome it," Grey Worm said, walking past him. "I've been seen enough for one life." And just like that, it ended. In the weeks that followed, Westeros changed in ways no one expected. Grey Worm and the Unsullied sailed for Nath, just as Missandei once dreamed. Whether they made it, no one ever knew. The Dothraki scattered, some returning to Essos, others disappearing into the mountains. Jon Snow, the man who didn't want a throne, refused it again. "I won't be king," he told the council that gathered in the ashes of Dragonstone. "Find someone else." But no one agreed on who. Edmure suggested himself, and was laughed out of the tent. Gendry had Baratheon blood, but too little support. Tyrion was offered the crown by some, but refused. "I've killed too much," he said. "I'm done deciding who should live and who should burn." In the end, it was Sansa who made the boldest move. "The North remains free," she declared. "Independent. We will not bend the knee again." And no one dared stop her. Jon returned to the Night's Watch. Not because he was exiled, but because he didn't belong anywhere else. He passed through the gates of Castle Black one final time, Ghost at his side, watching the white fields stretch endlessly before him. He never married, never ruled, never spoke of Daenerys again. Tyrion vanished for a while. Rumors said he lived quietly in the reach, drinking away his days in a vineyard. Others said he sailed across the narrow sea, looking for answers in old Valyria. No one ever confirmed which was true. Arya sailed west, not for power, but for silence. The world had taken everything she loved. She owed it nothing in return. And as for the Iron Throne, it was melted, broken, left to ruin in the Red Keep. The realm decided no one would sit upon it again. Power would be shared. A council of lords and ladies would rule, fragile, always at risk, but a beginning, a better. World didn't rise overnight, but the fires went out, and for Westeros, that was enough.